57 million people are living with dementia right now worldwide. By 2050, that number is expected to be close to 2.5 times higher, and there's still no cure. But there's a real growing body of evidence that something as ordinary as your omega-3 intake changes the odds. And today I want to show you exactly what that evidence proves and where it runs out. Doctor, and this channel isn't about scaring you into buying fish oil. It's about slowing down and asking what the evidence can actually support and what it can't. This is part 3 of our omega-3 series, and today we're on the brain. We'll look at what the population data shows, why the drug trial evidence is messier than you'd expect, and why timing might matter more than the total amount that you take. Here's the biology in one line. DHA, one of the 2 main omega-3s, is the most abundant fat in your brain's grey matter, built right into the membranes of your neurons, your brain cells, especially at the synapses, which are the ends of the brain cells, where the brain cells talk to each other. EPA, on the other hand, is thought to calm the kind of low-grade brain inflammation that's increasingly linked to Alzheimer's. Now that's the theory, and the question, as always, is whether it survives contact with an actual clinical trial. And the answer isn't a clean yes or no. It depends entirely on which kind of evidence you're looking at. And it turns out on timing as well. Start with the population studies because this is where the evidence is strongest. A 2023 analysis pulled 48 long-term studies over 100,000 people overall and found higher dietary omega-3 intake was linked to a 20% risk of dementia and cognitive decline. There's a dose-response pattern underneath that too. Every extra tenth of a gram of DHA per day was linked to about an 8% lower risk, and every extra tenth of a gram of EPA closer to a 10% lowering of risk. So, more omega-3 in the diet, less risk up to a certain point. That's not proof that the omega is doing the work. People who eat more oily fish tend to eat better across the board, but it's a big and consistent signal and it lines up with the biology. So that's the encouraging part. Now for the more honest part. When you actually give people omega-3 supplements in a randomized trial, the gold standard that is, the results get messier. A 2025 review pooled 5 trials in people with diagnosed Alzheimer's, 700 patients, and found no significant improvement on cognitive testing. None. Which isn't actually surprising once you think about what's happening in the brain by that stage. You're not going to reverse years of neuron loss with a supplement. A different 2024 review looked at a different outcome, how fast people were declining day to day, rather than test scores, and within that review, a smaller slice of the trials did find a significant slowing. 2 reviews, 2 different outcome measures, 2 different answers. That's definitely not a contradiction to ignore. That's genuinely what the evidence looks like at the moment. Like a lot of things in medicine, the honest answer is it depends, which is a terrible thing to put in a video title, I know, but here we are. So, supplements don't seem to fix Alzheimer's once it's established, but they might slow the day-to-day decline. Different question, different answer. Here's the pattern that keeps showing up though. The earlier you look, the better omega-3 seems to perform. One trial gave people with mild cognitive impairment the stage before a dementia diagnosis 2 grams of DHA a day for a year and found it significantly slowed shrinkage of the hippocampus, which is the brain's memory center, alongside real improvement on cognitive testing. And in people who carry the ApoE4 gene, which is the strongest genetic risk factor for Alzheimer, carried by around a quarter of us, well, a 2024 trial found something worth sitting with. Across the whole trial, omega-3 didn't significantly slow the brain lesions being measured, but in the ApoE4 carriers specifically, it did significantly slow the loss of white matter integrity, the brain's internal wiring. The people at the highest genetic risk were actually the ones in which they had the biggest signal showing up. And that's really the headline of this whole episode. Omega-3 doesn't look like a rescue plan for a brain that's already in big trouble. It looks like something that only works if you've been taking it early, the way you'd build bone density in your 20s and not try to be rebuilding it at the age of 70. If you want a number to aim for rather than a vague eat more fish, there is a blood test called the Omega-3 Index. I've spoken about it in other videos. Below 4% as a result is considered a high risk, and 8% or above is the well-established target for cardiovascular protection, and it's a reasonable target for brain health too, though the brain-specific research on that exact cutoff is still catching up to the cardiac research. Now, if you've had one of these tests done or you're curious what your own number might be, please tell me in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how many of you have actually checked and what you found if you wish to share that. Practically, oily fish 2 to 3 times a week, salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring, anchovies remains a genuinely evidence-backed change, and it's the one I would make first. If you're supplementing, especially if you don't eat much fish, the trials that showed benefit tended to use roughly a gram a day or more of combined EPA and DHA. That's a reasonable ballpark to discuss with your own doctor. Algae-based omega-3 is a solid plant-based option, since algae is where the fish get it from in the very first place. So, can I tell you omega-3 prevents Alzheimer's? No. Nobody can tell you that yet. What I can tell you is that the population evidence is consistent, the biology makes sense, and the trials that do show benefit all point the same direction. Earlier is better than later. And in a field with almost nothing else to offer, that's not nothing. Next episode, we're going to leave the brain and go to the joints, omega-3, inflammation, and what the evidence actually says about arthritis. I hope to see you there. And if you found this useful or know someone whom this may benefit, please share it. Also, please consider liking and subscribing. This is the way in which the channel is going to grow and hopefully reach more people and help more people. I really appreciate your support. In the meantime, stay well. Ciao for now.